Notre Dame dropped to 3-7 with a 14-point loss to Virginia Tech on Sunday, 77-63 game. Patrick, Mike Brey's squad struggling this year. All six of the previous losses were by 10 points or less. And this Virginia Tech game was close, into the second half, but wheels just kind of fell off, Patrick.
Yeah, it's just kind of another game on the script of being good enough to generate good shots and play good defense for 20 minutes or so, but not having the ability to do it for long enough. And that's why you keep kind of seeing these same results against ranked teams or just say Ken Palm top 50 teams where they're close because there's moments where it all kind of looks like you think it would or looks like Bray's best teams. And then there's just stretches where they're easy to guard and just not really creating many makeable shots. And that's where you see games like this one against Virginia Tech, where you make 2 field goals in the second half. And Kentucky, really a similar script a month ago, even though that game was a win because they were able to play some defense down the stretch. But that's just kind of been the theme of it. And, a common theme of a lot of teams, if you look at in high major leagues most years that are kind of at the bottom half or bottom third of the standings like Notre Dame occupies now. These are still ACC teams that have good enough talent to play for stretches, but it takes more than that. So that close loss figure that you mentioned is, hey, it could be worse, but the fact that it kind of keeps coming up there makes it kind of hard to look at it and say, hey, they're close and think like they're punching up when you kind of see a little bit of the rinse, wash, and repeat game script of some of these losses.
Virginia, a road game coming up on Wednesday. Boston College, Howard, Miami. That's Notre Dame's next 4 games. Do you think, looking at this schedule, is it more of the same? Or, does Notre Dame potentially have a path here to turn things around?
Well, if you look at the next game in Virginia, that's somebody who has a habit of making life hard for its opponents on the offensive end, which is the way they stifle all your dribble drives and don't give you anything or really much in the way of clean looks. And that's what really played out when Notre Dame hosted Virginia a couple weeks ago. So that one, you just kind of look at it, look at the last game, look at these recent ones against ranked teams, and just you don't really think there's much in the way of signs that it's gonna turn around or anything, unless Nate Laszewski goes off for an entire game and they get a little more defensive play down the stretch or just a better 40 minutes of defense or anything. But I guess it is worth pointing out in that all the losses this year are to Ken Palm top 50 teams. And maybe that's kind of the one situation where it could find itself where it gets back on a little bit of a run or finds itself in the similar spot as far as ACC record as it finished a year ago at 10-10, and that it's played a lot of really good teams. And last year it beat the teams it by and large was supposed to and didn't punch above its weight class. I guess that outcome is still possible. When you look at the schedule you have pulled up there, I mean, Boston College, maybe right winless in the ACC, was the worst team in the ACC last year. 4 out of the next 6 are against teams outside the Ken Palm top 50. So you have a little bit of a path there. But yeah, in the immediate future in Virginia, another tough one is going to be hard for them to win if they keep playing like they are.
No, Patrick, what would you say about kind of the state of the program right now? Certainly not a very optimistic time right now. I mean, the news about Ryan Ayers being charged with voyeurism and domestic battery, even though he hasn't been with the program for a few months now, that's just not a good look. Program doesn't seem to be trending up. Is it kind of just a matter of, hoping that some of the young guys on the team continue to improve, and then Paul Atkinson, the Yale transfer, Blake Wesley and the incoming recruits? Is it kind of just a matter of hoping that those guys pan out?
Yeah, good news in the sense of Paul Atkinson. That's kind of something him as a post player that they could really use as a Jawan Durham replacement, perhaps Jawan Durham upgrade. Blake Wesley giving you some athleticism and defense back there, two things that could really use in the backcourt, and then J.R. Kanisi, the shooting and overall his all around game has really progressed since he committed to Notre Dame. But yeah, that's kind of the outlook right now as far as you know. This is a group that's been together a while and still trying to figure out how to punch through. And maybe the best chance of that, if this kind of script keeps up, is just kind of waiting and see what those reinforcements next year are going to be able to do and what's going to become a key year for Mike Brey.
Yeah, it just feels like, Patrick, these years, like these teams have been stagnant and just kind of existing, like you mentioned. Then it's, well, next year. Like, is next year really the year, or is it going to be the year after that?
Well, and just as far as how the roster sets up, next year looks better in that, yeah, maybe this group doesn't have this ceiling. Just if you look at where it's kind of seemingly like it's plateaued right now, or at least hasn't been able to pop up a little bit more from a plateau that they've seemed to reach. But yeah, I mean, if you look in 2 years from now, it's going to be a lot of turnover. And even if, all right, you want to see that just as far as trying to reset and punch through, turnover is still a big thing. And yeah, I would say at least next year, just because I think they could use a Blake Wesley with his athleticism and someone like Paul Atkinson, who's a highly efficient, highly skilled post scorer that they haven't really had in a little while. But this isn't me saying, especially just with how this season has gone, that I'm promising some kind of big uptick into a top 5 or 6 ACC finish and a single digit tournament seed or anything. But as far as looking at when it's best set up to try to push through like it's been trying to do, yeah, you look at perhaps next year's roster with a bunch of seniors who still have 16 games left to try to figure out whatever they got to figure out. Mike Brey mentioned just mental toughness last night after the loss, and then with some reinforcements that are good fits. Yeah, that's kind of what you're hanging your hat on.
All right, well, for more coverage of Notre Dame men's basketball and women's basketball, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel here, like this video, and go to blueandgold.com for all of your Notre Dame athletics coverage.